Today I'm going to tell you the story of a witch named Harriet Boggs. So it's the 1900s and her story takes us back to the small town of Whispering Pines. Now Whispering Pines is a relatively close-knit community, agricultural, small town, and generally speaking, the town looks out for each other. Now one important thing to note about this town is that it sits on a relatively large creek bed. Now, up the creek about 3 miles as the crow flies is a town called Taylor Creek. Now at this point in time, Taylor Creek was still really underdeveloped. It was heavily wooded, lots of wildlife running around, and not a place you'd want to be caught by yourself, especially after dark. But of course, there are always those people who thrive in these environments, and Harriet Boggs was one of those. Now, because of Harriet's mysterious ways, her desire to live alone, and her relative reclusiveness, there were a lot of rumors that started to come out about her. Some reports claim that the closer you got to Harriet's homestead, the more uneasy you would start to feel, and it would feel as though you were being followed. In fact, there are other reports that claim seeing cats all over the woods staring at them as though they were being watched. Other accounts would claim that as they got closer to Harriet's house, they would start seeing mysterious fireballs on top of the water. Now, of course, this could have just been methane gas. This is a very natural phenomenon, but people said it happened more than it should have, and it was reported being seen quite a bit. In addition to this, these fireballs appeared to move at will, as though warning whoever was coming nearer to stay away from Harriet's house. The closer they got, the bigger it would grow. Again, not sure how true it is, but it is a little weird. Other reports include seeing statues in the woods like the one behind me, or hearing an ever-present humming or singing, although there was no one around for miles. Now, as these events started to get more common, these tales started to flow out of Taylor Creek, where Harriet lived, and into the towns around her. So as these tales started to spread, Harriet became a figure of folklore more than anything. Parents would use her stories to get their children to behave, stay out of the woods, listen, but it also became kind of a good campfire tale to tell as well. That was until the flood, though. Now, this was an unprecedented flood, unpredictable, once-in-a-lifetime event. In fact, a once-in-a-100-year event. But because they couldn't justify anything causing this level of devastation and catastrophe, such as living below the water table, they determined that it was only one thing and one thing only: witchcraft. In fact, it wasn't just any old witchcraft, it was Harriet Boggs. And what made it even worse was the fact that the flood didn't just bring devastation, it brought mosquitoes, and mosquitoes brought their own special gift, and that was yellow fever. And as the town started getting sick, people started dying, and of course that made people even more upset. Then to put the cherry on all of the chaos is the fact that the town's only doctor, Dr. Beauregard Jackson, passed away due to the fever, and this left the village utterly devastated. And of course, because this place was utterly devastated, they had suffered extreme loss, they needed a scapegoat. Now, this is where the story takes a dark turn, because in their grief, the men of the town decided that somebody needed to pay, and that somebody was Harriet Boggs. So they decided that they were going to go and get her and string her up. Now, it would be a courtesy if she even made it to the gallows, but we know that wasn't going to happen. But anyways, the men decided they would pursue Harriet, but there was something that stopped them. And that something was the fact that it was getting dark. Now, according to these men, Harriet had dominion over the dark, and it wouldn't be wise to meet somebody in their element. So they decided they would wait until morning, and then they would go and find Harriet and make her face justice. Now, all that night, the men waited up, anticipating their chance for justice. But they weren't alone. There were howls and cackles outside of the window, cats, weird figures. Everything seemed to be surrounding the town, just a feeling of utter darkness. Now, morning finally came for the men, and as they prepared to go out and exact their revenge, they noticed that there was a black cauldron in the middle of their town square. And as they got closer to it, they noticed there was a note on it that said, "Drink me." Now, of course, nobody wants to drink mysterious liquid from a mysterious cauldron, but desperate times call for desperate measures. So they called every member of the town out, and everybody got a spoonful, and as they were drinking it, they noticed there was a change in the weather. Previously murky and kind of muggy outside, the sky cleared and there was bright sun. So on this very cloudy day, the men called a town meeting, and everyone in the town came out to see what they wanted to talk about. And of course, as they got there, they noticed the cauldron as well. Now, the men instructed them to do one thing, and that was take a drink. So everybody passed the ladle around. Don't worry about any other viruses, just drink the juice. And everybody in the town did so. And miraculously, as they all started to pass the ladle around, the sun started to come. Again, these people had just experienced some massive storms and flooding, so the weather was still pretty bad for them. But like I said, as they started to pass the ladle, the sun came out, things appeared to cool off just a little bit, and you could feel the overall mood in the town just get a little bit lighter. Even better, in a few days, people miraculously started to recover. They gave this juice to everybody in the town who could drink it, and if they couldn't drink it, they would just pour it down their throat. So the nurses at this point were pretty happy. Again, they had even lost their doctor, so things were really starting to look up for this town. Now at this point, because the men were pretty satisfied with what had happened with the cauldron, they decided they wanted to go and thank, again, the magic that they accused accused her of using to kill the townspeople and cause the flood was now magic they were happy to have around them and magic they were thankful for. And they weren't crazy, and I will say, given the time, this was a pretty decent move on their end to thank her as opposed to... So the men set out to go find Harriet and give her a sincere thank you. But the funny thing is, as they approached where her house was supposed to be, there was a message on an old tree stump that had fallen. And as they approached the note, the men decided it was probably best to go ahead and turn around. And so they did so. And sadly, Harriet never got their thank you. But that's because on the parchment note they found tacked to the stump, it said, "Don't come looking again." And so they never did. But anyways, let me know if you've heard the story of Harriet Boggs before and if you would have helped the town or let them pay.